My name is Natasha, and my story might sound like something from a movie, so unbelievable that people would say it's a bit too much. But my life wasn't a movie, it was a harsh reality wrapped in emptiness and patience. We were 5 sisters, no brothers, no relatives, just a small home and our hardworking father. My mother passed away early, leaving father to play both roles. But how can one person manage everything alone? Our childhood passed without dreams that girls usually have about their weddings, big houses, expensive clothes, cars, and a loving husband. For us, those felt like fairy tales. Whenever a girl in the neighborhood got married, we'd quietly peek through the door and watch the decorated cars, loud music, and laughing girls, feeling those moments like a dream that was never meant for us. One by one, my elder sisters got married, no dowry, no special alliances, just wherever someone agreed. One day, my eldest sister told father to find a good match for me. Father, tired and worn, said, "Daughter, good matches don't come to the poor. Rich people ask for furniture and jewelry, Natasha will go to a modest home. Just pray her husband is good." I stayed silent, knowing whatever father decided was my fate. I studied till high school, just enough to read and write as father wanted. Our situation worsened. My eldest sister's in-laws taunted her, the second sister's husband stopped working within a year, and father's face aged prematurely. Then something unexpected happened, a meeting with my eldest sister's in-laws. They told us about Bruce, a respectable man with 4 sisters and a single mother, whose father died when he was young. Bruce earns and supports his family. Father's eyes showed hesitation, like any father would when handing his daughter's future to someone else. When asked if Bruce's family demanded anything, sister said no, only that the girl should be simple and traditional, and they liked me. My sisters' faces brightened for the first time in years, feeling recognized as humans. Father quietly asked about Bruce's character and living situation and finally gave his consent, saying, "Bruce is a responsible man. Natasha's luck is good. God has given this without asking." The wedding was simple with a few close relatives. I felt a strange calm and happiness, accepting whatever comes next. Bruce seemed to see the questions hidden in my eyes. On our wedding night, he told me about his struggles, the loss of his father, his mother's hardships, and his responsibility for his siblings. He asked for my support and said not to expect luxury, just to adjust with what we have. I promised to stand by him without complaints. Soon after, I learned a lot about Bruce's family, including his 4 sisters and a dominating mother who often reminded me this was her house. Bruce went to work daily, always patient with his sister's demands. Then one night, he told me he was going to Oman for a better job opportunity, promising to send money home and support his family. Though it was only our first month of marriage, he was ready to leave thousands of miles away. Before leaving, he gave me clothes and a handbag, asking me to stay strong if he didn't call often. The next morning, as he left, I stood at the door waving, feeling for the first time that my days were truly about to change. After Bruce left, the house felt empty, his bed untouched. His mother often taunted me, saying he was far away and not a prince. Bruce called from Oman, tired but hopeful, telling me the living conditions were cramped but the work was good. After a few days, Bruce sent some money, and a week later, Natasha's mother-in-law announced it to the family, and Bruce's sisters gathered around. Natasha was washing dishes and wasn't even called over. At dinner, she quietly mentioned needing some money for essentials, but her mother-in-law sharply replied that the household expenses were covered by everyone and that the money sent from outside was for all, so Natasha had no personal expenses. Silent, Natasha didn't argue or complain. Later, Bruce told his mother to give Natasha some money separately, but Natasha said she wasn't used to asking for anything and whatever came was enough. Money kept coming irregularly, sometimes monthly, sometimes every 2 months, but Natasha was often ignored. Bruce's sisters planned outings, picked new clothes, and her mother-in-law agreed to everything, while Natasha only did housework and tended to her swollen feet in her room. Sometimes she wanted to complain to Bruce, but he sounded tired on the phone, saying he had worked 6 hours under the open sky with a sore neck and no work came without full payment. This made Natasha feel ashamed to say anything. One day, the house buzzed with excitement as guests arrived and Bruce's sisters' weddings were planned simultaneously, a big expense that Bruce was expected to manage alone. Bruce later told Natasha he might stay 3 more months overseas for better pay, so he could afford everything for his sisters. His mother-in-law gave Natasha a list of dowry items to buy, telling her not to worry about money. Natasha silently shopped, reported back, and nobody asked if she picked anything for herself. Wedding preparations filled the house, with tailors measuring clothes, cooks planning meals, and sisters picking matching jewelry, while Bruce called daily, reminding his mother about orders but never present himself. Natasha overheard Bruce's sister saying he sent extra money for her favorite servant, and the proud mother-in-law boasted her son never let anything lack. Natasha quietly drank tea and felt invisible. Then Bruce called with worries about finances, saying he had taken loans to cover wedding expenses and hoped to pay them off soon. Natasha gently urged him not to overburden himself, but he insisted he'd rest only after the weddings were done. Shopping spiraled out of control, guests from other villages were invited, and menus expanded. Natasha found a register listing all wedding expenses and loans in Bruce's name, including 2 loans from Oman, which she quietly saved in her phone. Bruce confessed he barely had time to rest, working mornings and buying supplies evenings, all to fulfill his sister's demands, saying his happiness lay in theirs and praying to pay off loans soon. One night, Natasha took the heavy gold set Bruce gave her on their wedding night to the market and sold it, feeling a strange relief when she told Bruce she cleared 1 loan. He was surprised and said it should have been his duty, but Natasha said she was his wife. That night, wedding jewelry arrived, and sisters joyfully opened boxes, the house alive like a movie scene, with Bruce's sister demanding he arrange cars for the procession. The mother-in-law promised to talk to Bruce, who wouldn't refuse. Natasha quietly endured the tension of Bruce's hard work, his heartbeat, and his sister's wishes. 3 wedding processions arrived in 3 days, full of joy, noise, gifts, food, and Bruce's money, but Bruce himself wasn't present for any. After all 3 sisters left, the rooms emptied, and the mother-in-law declared everything perfect, saying Bruce fulfilled his duty as a brother. Natasha thought silently that Bruce also fulfilled his duty as a husband, though no one noticed. When the wedding excitement faded, the house felt empty, and one night Natasha felt an unusual exhaustion that turned into a high fever the next day, confining her to bed. My body was breaking down, my head felt heavy, and the pain in my lower back made it hard to even get up. By evening, I felt a burning sensation on one side near my kidney. My mother-in-law entered the room, and summoning courage, I asked her for some money to buy medicine, explaining that I might have kidney pain and the fever wasn't going down. She looked at me as if I was speaking nonsense and said she had no money, and if I needed medicine, I should ask Bruce, who would send money. She wasn't responsible for anyone's expenses. I stayed silent, my body burning with fever and a fire burning inside my heart. The next 2 days passed in the same condition. No medicine, no one even brought me a glass of water. When my sister-in-law came home, she sat watching TV while I couldn't even turn over in bed. Bruce called and said my voice didn't sound good and asked if I was all right. I smiled weakly, saying it was just the changing weather making me feel unwell and to not worry, I'd manage. Bruce sounded exhausted, saying he hadn't been able to work for days but had to keep paying off loans. I told him I prayed for his safety and that everything else would manage. After the call, tears filled my eyes but the fever's heat dried them up. The next day, the pain worsened so much breathing was difficult. I asked my mother-in-law again for medicine, hoping the fever would subside, but she sniffed and said she wouldn't waste the little money left after the weddings on useless medicine. Bruce had entrusted her with the money, and it wasn't meant for me. I said nothing, closed the door, lay down, and hadn't eaten for 2 days, surviving only on water. That afternoon, the youngest sister-in-law's friend came, laughing about how Bruce had managed to marry off his 3 sisters all at once, and she asked if there were any troubles, to which the sister-in-law laughed and said Bruce handled everything while Natasha was just like a guest watching. Later, when my fever eased slightly, I messaged Bruce secretly, telling him I hadn't taken medicine for 2 days and mother-in-law said there was no money, and if possible, could he send some or my health would worsen? An hour later, Bruce called, sounding very worried, asking how I had such a high fever with no medicine, promising to send money immediately. He said he had already told his mother to give me a monthly allowance, but I said it had just been 2 days and I was feeling better, not to worry. I confessed I worried more about him, carrying all the burdens. His voice held regret. He said he never wanted me to feel deprived but things were out of his control. That evening, everyone was sitting at home when my mother-in-law loudly announced that all money Bruce sent was under her control and no daughter-in-law or outsider had any claim on it. It was her son's money, meant for the household. I quietly listened, went inside, shut the door, and sat on the bed, feeling for the first time that my existence here didn't matter to anyone. 2 weeks after the weddings, the youngest sister-in-law's engagement was fixed. Everything happened so fast that the house buzzed with preparations again. Bruce told Uma he was preparing to return soon but his work, exhaustion, and unpaid debts weighed on him. He said once Avni's wedding was done well, he'd come back, hoping for some rest. I knew rest was not in his fate. His body was starting to show damage, blisters on hands, swelling legs, but he refused medicine, saying it was minor and he'd heal himself. The day before his return, he messaged saying he was coming back. I had many thoughts but only replied that I would wait for him. When he returned, he wasn't the same. His color was dull, face scarred, hands peeled. He smiled tiredly at the door and said the preparations were complete, never mentioning his wounds. I was working in the room. Days later, he came in looking very troubled, sat on the sofa, and said they needed a car for the wedding as his in-laws demanded it. I reminded him of his fragile health and that it wasn't the time for doctors, but he insisted the weddings must be completed first. The next morning, he went to the market and came back with a car booking receipt, exhaustion, and burden clear on his face. I asked if he had taken a loan. He admitted he had no money but couldn't refuse his sister's dignity. That night, my mother-in-law and youngest sister-in-law sat happily. The sister-in-law tearfully recalled how Bruce was silent when she asked for a car, saying if her father were alive, he'd have given everything without asking. Mother-in-law patted her head, saying Bruce was both father and brother, and everything belonged to him. I stood at the door listening while Bruce remained silent with eyes closed. On the wedding day, the cars and procession arrived. Guests praised Bruce for doing wonders, but no one asked where he got the money from. After the guests left, Bruce sat quietly, his legs covered with wounds. I bent down and told him we must visit a doctor. He opened his eyes and said everything was over now. The weddings happened, mother and sisters were happy, and maybe now he could take care of himself. For the first time, I saw tears in his eyes, tears held back for years, not shed for anyone but himself. Not long after his return, his health declined rapidly, rashes appeared and filled with fluid, eventually bursting with pus. I urged him many times to see a doctor, but he insisted he was just tired and would heal with rest. I tended to his wounds daily, cleaning and dressing them carefully, but his condition worsened, with more sores appearing on hands and feet. One day, my mother-in-law entered the room. When Bruce turned his back, bending at the waist, his face showed shock at the wounds and pus covering him. He looked down and said to his mother, Mom, I don't know what's happening, the pain is terrible but I haven't been to the doctor yet. His mother's behavior changed. She said this disease seemed very dangerous and doubted if he would even get better. I assured her we would take him to a doctor, but she immediately said, Go then, but make it clear no one else in this house gets this disease. If anything happens to me or my daughters, I don't think I've sinned as much as what's happening to my son. Bruce closed his eyes hearing this. I told her it was just an illness, and with timely treatment, Bruce would recover. She laughed bitterly, saying, What time is left now? You too have become a burden to this house. And yes, the money that used to come has stopped. Before I could reply, Natasha's sister-in-law entered, saying a friend told her Bruce had a contagious disease that was frightening just to see. His mother snapped that she couldn't bear to watch this anymore and told Bruce and me to leave until his illness was cured, saying the house must remain safe for the rest of the family. Bruce asked where he should go, and she said anywhere but here. I held Bruce's hand and said we would leave without needing anything. That night, we left the house empty-handed. Bruce was barely walking, and I supported him. We reached a deserted spot a little outside the village with an old hut surrounded by bushes, where I made a shaded area with old clothes and plastic sheets, our shelter. The rainy season was near, and the hut leaked constantly. I spent nights cleaning water with a small cloth and mornings changing Bruce's bandages. I worked 2 hours a day cleaning at a nearby mansion and made herbal medicines myself for Bruce's wounds, with no help from anyone. One day returning from work, I saw blood flowing from Bruce's wounds. Opening a bandage revealed a deepening sore. He opened his eyes and apologized for being a burden, but I told him he was my husband, not a burden. I promised to bring medicine from the nearby city and urged him not to lose hope. He smiled faintly, agreeing that his mother was right about the severity of his disease, but I told him his illness was the result of sacrifice, not sin, and that God would reward him. Bruce softly said the only reward he needed was my support. The next morning, I cleaned his wounds again and left for work, living each day as a test, proving that he was not alone. The weather soon made the hut unbearable, scorching heat by day and cold winds burning his wounds at night. Bruce's health deteriorated. I cleaned and bandaged him every day, though sometimes his body refused to respond. The mansion owner once asked about him, and I simply said he was alive. That was enough. One day I found Bruce lying quietly, sweating and pale, struggling to breathe. I fetched water, wet a cloth on his forehead, and promised to bring medicine from the city. He asked how long I would keep doing this alone, and I said until he got better, and even after. I found an herbal remedy from an old store and gave it to him, though his condition worsened. The next morning, Bruce held my hand and said I was incredibly brave, that happiness might never come to me with him, but I never complained. I told him he had my love, the most precious gift. He sighed deeply, regretting the burdens on his shoulders and wishing he could have given me everything I ever wanted. I told him to stay quiet and get better. He smiled faintly and said maybe it wasn't his time, but God would reward my patience. Then, resting his head softly in my lap, he quietly passed away. I stroked his hair, heart pounding in slow, painful beats. The silence inside the hut was overwhelming, as if even the wind had stopped. I held Bruce's face, trying to stop time, but time never stops. I sat silently until evening, the sun setting outside while light lingered inside the hut. Bruce was gone, but he left me with his courage, dreams, and tired smile. The next morning, I gathered some villagers and arranged Bruce's last rites. My husband had died, sacrificing his life for others. Returning to the hut, I took a small stone, wrote his name on it, and placed it in a corner, our silent memorial. After Bruce passed away, life took a different turn. I kept the hut clean, washing the stone with his name every morning and setting it aside, while during the day I worked at the mansion. The owners gave me ration for a few weeks, but then that stopped too. Time felt silent, with no difference between day and night. 2 months had passed since Bruce's death. One night, an eerie silence prevailed, and I kept hearing Bruce's voice echoing in my ears, saying that God would surely reward my patience. Those words repeated in my mind as I stared silently at the hut's roof, which would leak whenever the clouds came, still standing ready to get wet. The next day, I prayed and started wearing a white sari instead of colorful clothes. One day, sitting under a tree near the village, I had not eaten for 2 days. Work at the mansion had also stopped. Maybe they hired another maid or didn't understand my plight. In the evening, returning to the hut, I felt a chill and weakness had increased greatly. While searching for firewood, a car appeared on the road, stopped near the hut, and a young man along with a lawyer got out. The young man greeted me and asked if I was Natasha. I nodded quietly. He showed me a file. The lawyer read aloud that a bungalow in the city area, number 827, was in my name, along with the business connected to it, and its monthly profit would be transferred to my account. I was shocked. How did all this belong to me? The young man explained that it was because of my late husband. His father had been a laborer, sick and unable to work regularly, but Bruce had promised to pay for his education, which allowed him to study and reach where he was today, all thanks to Bruce. Tears welled up as I asked how he knew Bruce had passed. He said his father had always spoken of him but never found any trace or photo. After years of searching, he learned about Bruce's death and that his wife lived in a hut nearby. The young man said he bought the bungalow in Bruce's name and registered it, but it all belonged to Bruce and now to me. I looked at Bruce's stone in the corner of the hut. The young man, named Arpit, said I was like a mother to him, as his own mother died when he was a child and his father recently passed away, but Bruce was like a father to him. Hearing this left me speechless, only silently grateful. Bruce's words from his last moments had come true. The reward for patience had arrived. Arpit told me I wouldn't live here anymore and that he would take me to my new home. I wrapped Bruce's stone in my sari's palu, took some old clothes, and left the hut. Arpit looked at the hut and softly remarked how I had lived there. I confirmed, bowing my head, that it was where Bruce spent his last days. In the car, I felt peace for the first time, watching the fading image of the hut outside. Arpit took me to a large white house with fresh trees and a golden board at the gate with Bruce's name. My steps froze as memories of Bruce, the hut, the silence, and wounds flooded my mind. Inside, the rooms had neat furniture, white curtains, and carpets. None of it was for me, but for Bruce, a reward for all he had done for others. Arpit said this was my room and to tell him if I needed anything. He promised to visit every morning. I declined, but he smiled, saying now he was what he was meant to be for me, as my son. Closing the door behind me, a strange calm settled in my heart. I placed Bruce's stone on a high shelf. Bruce had finally found a home, and time passed. Weeks and months went by, with Arpit visiting, giving business updates, profits improving and plans for a new branch. The numbers meant little to me. Bruce's name had already won. One day, Arpit said he wanted to do something to keep Bruce's memory alive. I agreed after thinking that we should create something to heal others' pain, especially those rejected due to illness. Arpit quietly agreed, as if recalling how Bruce was shunned. I nodded, saying yes, that was his real reward, a place where no one is rejected. Arpit quickly said, then an hospital. I agreed, a hospital named after Bruce, treating serious diseases like allergies with humanity. Arpit showed me files and said we'd visit a plot the next day, hoping to start soon. The next day, we went to a large empty plot. The land was barren but my heart was filled with noise. I declared this would be Bruce's legacy, where his name would live on. Arpit called an engineer on the spot to clear the land and complete paperwork by tomorrow. On the way back, I was silent. Arpit asked if I was worried. I said no, just thinking that Bruce never asked for this, yet what he gave was never seen before. Now it was time to write his name on these walls that would never fall. The hospital plans, names, and instructions were being finalized, and I remained silent on one condition: that every patient would have open doors, and outside each room it would be written, "This is a house of compassion, not charity." Bruce always listened to me in everything. One day he said he had thought of something for me too, an NGO foundation for women abandoned by their husbands or kicked out by their in-laws. I looked at him, and he said such women must have support because if they weaken, families break apart. The hospital, named after my late husband, had started to take shape. I used to go there daily, watching the bricks being laid and walls rising, as if my husband's sacrifices were captured in them. My time had shifted from the loneliness of the hut to a peacefulness marked by a name that was once unheard but would never be forgotten. The hospital building was complete, painted white, doors installed, and a big board at the gate read Bruce Memorial Hospital. The opening ceremony was simple, and Bruce told me they kept outpatient services free from day one to welcome people from nearby villages. I would go early every morning, meet patients, talk to them, and then in the evening sit in the room bearing Bruce's name. It was my sanctuary where I silently prayed and sometimes reflected on the past. One day Bruce informed me a new patient had arrived in very poor condition, covered with old wounds and scars. I asked the staff for her file and was stunned to see the name Martha Johnson, my mother-in-law's name. I asked if she had come alone. The nurse said 2 women, probably her daughters, accompanied her. I told them to keep her in the ward and notify me when she regained consciousness. Hours later, I was told she was awake and kept asking for water. When I entered her room, Martha was weak and pale, with her daughters silently seated nearby. Her face showed the same pain that once marked Bruce's last days, wounds on her hands, marks on her feet, and a voice full of suffering. She recognized me and said, "Natasha?" I nodded, telling her this hospital was in Bruce's name. Silence fell. Her face showed the burden she carried, and she confessed that her illness was the punishment for her mistakes. She had told her son that his suffering was a result of karma, and now she herself had fallen so low. I offered her water, telling her it was not a sin but a test of time, and justice is inevitable. She drank, trembling, while her daughters sat quietly. I reminded her this hospital belonged to Bruce, the man she had once cast out, who now provided her shelter. Martha bowed her head and said she was ashamed but had nothing left to offer but apologies. I stepped outside where Bruce was waiting, asking if that was her. I said yes, time had brought her back to the place we once left behind. Bruce asked if I wanted to keep her here in the hospital, and I quietly agreed, saying no one should be turned away here. This place was for humanity, not revenge. We stood silently by the hospital door as the sun set, golden rays falling on Bruce's nameplate, light that would never fade. Patient numbers had slightly dropped, and the staff had some relief. I continued to visit Bruce's room early each morning, review files, talk to doctors, and walk the wards during the day. Martha's treatment was ongoing, her wounds were healing, but a deeper scar of shame continued to bleed silently. One day Bruce told me Martha kept asking about me, seeming to want to say something. At noon, I visited her room. Martha tried to rise but I gently stopped her, telling her to rest. In a trembling voice, she said she wanted to apologize for all the pain she had caused, the suffering, the broken family after Bruce's death, the hurt she gave us. Now her body carried that sorrow, every wound and pain answering her own words. I looked into her eyes, now free of the pride that once hid in every phrase. She tearfully begged me for forgiveness, fearing she might die under the weight of guilt if I refused. Silence filled the room as rain began to fall outside, like time itself asking for forgiveness. I told her that forgiving her was my duty, to honor the patience I had shown Bruce, so nothing would be wasted. Tears flowed from her eyes, and her daughters wept too. I quietly left the room. Bruce asked what she said, and I replied that she said what a mother can say only after many years. Those days passed, Martha's treatment ended, but she was no longer fit to leave. A permanent room was arranged for her at the hospital where she could rest. Her daughters came to visit occasionally, sitting with her quietly, one sewing in the corner, the other lost in silence. One day Bruce suggested I take some time off for rest, as everything was now under control. I smiled and replied that I was spending my life searching for Bruce, but now it was this peace I had that mattered, that was enough for me. A few days later, An old acquaintance said a woman like me shouldn't be alone and should remarry since I was still young and life could start anew. I gently said that my life hadn't restarted, it was complete. When a woman calls out to her love in his last breath, that bond never ends. After Bruce, there was no space left in my heart for anyone else. That evening, I went to Bruce's room, cleaned the stone with his name, and sat quietly for a long time. On the walls, ration cards of patients Bruce had arranged from abroad hung, things he had done for others, now right before my eyes. Time passed, and the hospital's second block was completed. One day, Bruce's son said they wanted to name the hospital auditorium after me, but I refused immediately, saying it belonged to Bruce and always would. I was only the shadow guarding his name. Bruce bowed his head in acceptance. That day, the sun was bright, and I sat outside on a chair while birds chirped. In my heart, I said, Bruce, the dream you left behind, I have fulfilled it. Now you can rest peacefully, and I no longer wish to sleep because I have everything that once only lived in your words, love, loyalty, and the victory of patience. True love, sacrifice, and patience never go wasted, they bind hearts and time always decides in their favor. Friends, I hope you liked our story. If you did, please like the video. If you're new here, subscribe to the channel and don't forget to hit the notification bell so you're the first to get the next update.